Today, we are diving into one of history's most chilling and deeply disturbing cold cases. Seriously, this is a crime so bizarre, so brutal, that it has stumped investigators for more than 100 years. This is the story of the Hinterkaifeck murders. All right, so let's set the scene. I want you to picture it. We're going back to the spring of 1922 in rural Bavaria, Germany. It's a world that feels a million miles away from our own. Quiet, isolated. And on this one particular farm, something truly awful is about to happen. You know, this story really doesn't begin with the people. It begins with the place itself. To even start to understand what happened, you first have to get a feel for just how cut off this farm, Hinterkaifeck, really was. And when I say remote, I don't just mean it was out in the country. No, this place was deep in the Bavarian countryside, more than a kilometer away from the nearest tiny village. It was totally hidden from view. The only thing you would have heard out there was maybe the wind rustling through the trees. The farm was completely surrounded by these vast open fields and thick, dark forests. It was a place of deep, almost unsettling silence. And this is the part that's absolutely crucial. This complete and total isolation meant that nobody could see what was happening. Nobody could hear a thing. It was, unfortunately, the perfect stage for a tragedy to play out completely unnoticed. Okay, so let's rewind to the weeks right before the crime, because this is where the story gets really, really weird. The family living there started to notice a bunch of strange and, frankly, disturbing things. Signs that suggested they weren't alone. Just look at this list. I mean, can you imagine finding a single set of footprints in fresh snow leading to your house, but none leading away? Or hearing footsteps creaking around in your attic when everyone's supposed to be asleep? You can just feel the sense of dread building for this family. So when you put all these weird clues together, you're forced to ask this one deeply unnerving question. Was it possible that someone was already inside the farm, secretly living there, right under their noses? While all of this growing fear, this sense that something was wrong, it all came to a head on the night of March 31st, 1922. Under the cover of darkness, whatever was threatening this family finally came out of the shadows. 6 people, an entire family, 3 generations of it, murdered in one single night. And here they are, the farmer Andreas Gruber and his wife, Cecilia, their widowed daughter, Victoria, and her 2 small children, 7-year-old Cecilia and little 2-year-old Josef. And then, just tragically, the family's new maid, Maria Baumgartner. It was her very first day on the job. The killer didn't bring a weapon with them. No, investigators are pretty sure they used a mattock, a heavy farm tool, kind of like a pickaxe, that belonged to the family themselves. It was found right there at the scene. And the crime scene didn't look like a chaotic rampage. It looked cold, calculated. The main theory is that the killer somehow lured 4 of the family members into the barn, one by one, and killed them there. Then they went back into the house to murder the maid and the toddler. But the horror, believe it or not, did not end with the murders. In fact, what was discovered days later is maybe the most psychologically terrifying part of this whole case. You see, the killer, they didn't just run away. Just let that sink in for a second. This is what takes this crime from just a brutal murder to something else entirely, something almost beyond comprehension. The sheer nerve of the person who did this is what is so disturbing. And we know this happened. The evidence is undeniable. Neighbors later said they saw smoke coming from the chimney all weekend. When the bodies were finally found, all the farm animals had been fed and cared for, and inside the kitchen, someone had been preparing and eating meals. The killer stayed for days. So when the bodies are finally discovered, on April 4th, police show up to a crime scene that's just unlike anything they've ever seen. And even after 100 years of questions and investigations, it is still a complete and total mystery. You know, every logical theory just falls apart. Was it a robbery? Well, there was a ton of cash in the house that was never touched. A crime of passion? That doesn't explain the cold, methodical killings, or why the killer would hang around for days. Even that terrifying idea of a secret squatter, which seems to fit the clues, is just impossible to prove. So here's the bottom line. Over the years, more than 100 people have been questioned as suspects. The case has been reopened multiple times.
But nothing, not a single piece of evidence has ever led to a real answer. The killer of Hinterkaifeck was never found.
And so, that just leaves us with this one final haunting question that brings us right back to the beginning, right back to those strange clues. Were those footsteps in the attic real? Was the killer not some intruder who showed up one night, but a secret resident who had been living inside the walls of the farm all along, just waiting?